Hello, my name is and today I will be sharing with you the solutions to three problems from mathematics and physics. First, I will start with the Riemann hypothesis and why it is true. Second, I will talk about what is the body equation. And last but not least, I will talk about why the Goldbach conjecture is also true. So let me start with the Riemann hypothesis. For that, I need to draw a pair of axes. So on the vertical axis will be the complex or imaginary axis. This is the complex or imaginary axis. And the horizontal axis is the real axis. This is the real axis and this is the complex or imaginary axis. Now let me mark 1 on the real axis. This is 1. And I'm going to draw a line also to indicate where is the critical state for the Riemann hypothesis. This is 1 here and this here is 0 over here, the origin. So let me start by labeling the complex axis. I'll start with labeling with complex numbers. So the first one will be 1 plus 1i or just 1 plus I. 1 plus I. The second will be 2 plus 2i. Third will be 3 plus 3i. Fourth will be 4 plus 4i. And 5 will be 5 plus 5i. I'll also go below 0 and mark the negative axis with 5. So if it's negative, it will be minus 5 minus 5i. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 over here. Now, what I want to do is I want to take this complex number and bring it out onto the real plane, which is this area over here, known as the critical state in the Riemann hypothesis. So let's start with 1 plus 1i or 1 plus I. So to bring it onto the real plane, I have to convert the complex part into the real part. And how will I do that? I will multiply with I. I will multiply by I. So 1 plus I is 1 plus I. Now if I multiply with I, it becomes 1 plus I square. And we all know that I square is equal to negative 1. So therefore, 1 plus I square will be 1 plus minus 1 or 1 minus 1 or 0. Or 0. So 1 plus 1 is here. When I bring it out onto the real plane, it becomes 0 when I multiply it with I. Same for 2 plus 2i. This becomes 2 plus 2i square or 2 minus 2, which is 0. Same for 3 plus 3i. If I multiply with I, it becomes 3 plus I square or 3 minus 3, which is 0. Same with 4 plus 4i and 5 plus 5i. Now, what do I have to do if I want to bring these complex numbers onto the real plane? As I said, multiply with I. Sort of like rationalizing the denominator kind of a thing. And what is this distance over here in the middle? Well, it is this value which we just found out, which is 0 plus 1 divided by 2. For 2 plus 2i, 2 minus 2 is 0 plus 1 over here. Divide by 2 will give you this here distance in the middle over here. So in every case, it is 0 plus 1 divided by 2. 4 plus 4i, 4 minus 4 is 0 plus 1 divided by 2. 5 plus 5i square, 5 minus 5 which is 0 plus 1 divided by 2. So all of these numbers is 1.5. That is the real distance here. And the real plane is 1 over 2. That is why the real part of all the non-trivial zeros of the Riemann zeta function, the real part is always 1 over 2. Because this value here, this real distance is 1 over 2. And it goes on, almost forever, like 100 billion, 10 trillion, it keeps on going. Now, okay, let's also look at what happens below the axis, minus 5i. So minus 5 I squared, when you multiply with I, it becomes minus 5 plus 5, which is again equal to 0. And here plus 1, this here distance is 0 plus 1 divided by 2. So yeah, Riemann was right. And one more important thing here, you can see 1 over here. Now what is 1 actually also equal to? 1 is equal to 1 over 1 to the power 1 plus I. 1 is equal to 1 over 1 to the power 1 plus I. This is really important and crucial when we are talking about the Riemann zeta function. It is in that form of the Riemann zeta function. So yeah, Riemann was right. This is like a behind the scenes reason for why the theorem is true, why the hypothesis is true. Behind the scenes reason, what's going on behind. That's why it is true. So yeah, Riemann was right. Next, I would like to talk about the God equation. What is the God equation and why it is also true and why it is the God equation. So yeah, suppose I am in South Africa. There is a sea green beach, maybe I am somewhere near the Cape of Good Hope, and I am standing on the edge of a cliff. The God equation. Before that, it is Einstein had been chasing this equation for the last 30 years of his life, little knowing how close he really was. And it's an equation all of us are familiar with. The most famous equation ever in all of science. Yes, you guessed it. It's E is equal to mc squared. That is the God equation. Now the God equation is supposedly an equation no more than an inch or inch and a half long that can unify all the forces in the universe. You know, mainly the strong, weak nuclear, gravitational and electromagnetism. Now I have not been able to unify all four forces, but just gravity and electromagnetism. Now one reason, I'll give you an example why we cannot unify all four forces is this. Suppose we are talking about four sports: basketball, football, ice hockey and badminton. You can sort of unify basketball and with football by saying that in both the sports there is a ball and the objective is to get it from one side of the field to the other. But similarly, you cannot also compare or unify ice hockey and badminton at the same time. However, quantum theory has been able to unify the weak nuclear force with the electromagnetism, something known as the electroweak theory. But that's besides the point. I've been able to unify gravity with electromagnetism in the most famous equation in the world, E equals mc squared. This is the God equation. It has been hiding in plain sight all this time, and we all know it. Yeah, now to tell you why this is true, suppose I am in South Africa, near the Cape of Good Hope, standing at the edge of a cliff. Yeah, this is a cliff. There is a cliff, and I'm standing here. Suppose this is me. I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, and I have with me a ball of mass m. This is a ball I have of mass m. M is not for meters, m means mass. A ball with mass m, and I let go of the ball, and say one or 1.5 seconds later, it comes somewhere in the halfway point from where I let it go and the ground. It's somewhere, suppose it's somewhere at the halfway point over here. Now, what is the kinetic energy of the ball? Well, the kinetic energy of the ball is given by half mv squared. Now, keep in mind that at any given point of time during the free fall, half of its energy is potential and half is kinetic. Potential energy is always getting converted into kinetic energy during the free fall. So this is the kinetic energy. As I said, half the potential energy is always getting converted, and then half is potential at any given time and half is kinetic. So what is the total energy of the ball here of mass m? What is the total energy? Now, since I said half is potential and half is kinetic, this is the kinetic energy, half mv square. So, since half is the other one is potential energy, the total energy is half plus half mv square, or 2 times half mv square, which is actually mv square. So, the total energy of the ball at this point, at this speed, is mv square. Total energy is mv square at this point in time with that speed. Now, what is the maximum possible value for v that can give the total energy of the ball E? What is the maximum possible value for v? Well, in the universe, c, or the speed of light, is the maximum possible value for v. Therefore, we can change this mv square over here to mc square. Therefore, E is equal to mc square. Now, mind you that before, when I said the kinetic energy is half mv square, this v over here is dependent on the acceleration due to gravity g. And g is something like 9.81 to the meter square. So we see how we go from g here, v here, to c, and before that there is g, and c is electromagnetic phenomenon. Therefore, you can see how it sort of unifies gravity with electromagnetism, because c is the speed of light, which is electromagnetic phenomenon, speed of electromagnetic wave. So yeah, that is why I call this the God equation, and why E equals mc square is true. Now, last but not least, I would like to talk about why the Goldbach conjecture is also true. Now, what the Goldbach conjecture says is that every even number can be written as the sum of 2 prime numbers. Okay, well, one way how I think about it is, every prime number other than 2 or greater than 2 is odd, and the sum of 2 odd numbers will always be an even number. So that's one way to think about it. But I have another explanation why it is true. Take a look at this graph. I plotted all the prime numbers for the first 25 even numbers on both the x-axis and also on the y-axis. Now, if you look at 2, which is the smallest prime number, 1 is not a prime number. 2 is the only one where the distance from the origin is less than 2. But apart from 2, if you look at these dots, all of these dots represent even numbers as the sum of 2 prime numbers, the smallest and largest primes that equal that even number. Now, I have not included multiple prime numbers that give the same even number, but only the smallest and largest. So, as you can see, all of these dots are evenly spaced, and all of them represent even numbers. So, you could say that the smallest horizontal or vertical distance from one dot to the other is always 2 or a multiple of 2. Now, look at what is happening near the value 10 on the y-axis. Something interesting is going on here. Well, a long time ago, prime numbers were given as a step function, and what Riemann did, he altered the function a little bit to match the step function. With every one more high harmonic, it was getting closer and closer to the step function. And Riemann used 1 over log, and log always means something to do with base 10. So you can see near 10 on the y-axis, something interesting is going on. It exactly resembles. It's very similar to a step function. So that's something that's interesting. And all of the dots represent even numbers as the sum of 2 primes. And you can see how the smallest horizontal and vertical distance between any of these two is either 2 or a multiple of 2. So you can imagine that this graph will go on forever, and all of these dots, because these prime numbers are, will give even numbers, even number distance away from each other. Therefore, some of those primes will always be even. So that is why, as you can see, the Goldbach conjecture is also true. Now, all of this was a bit of, a lot of physics and maths and all of that. But I have another goal in mind. It has nothing to do with physics, maths, anything like that. And that is to convince you of the existence of God. Now, I have written a little book. It's called Born to Tell the Truth, now available on Amazon everywhere. And it gives 5 proofs of the existence of God. Proofs that no one has ever heard of before. You cannot refute them. Along with the answer to the question, who created God? So, and it also has a little bit of Harry Potter fan trivia by me because I'm a fan of the Harry Potter books. So here's a little promo for the book. Have a look.
Is there proof, undeniable proof, of God's existence? What if the truth about God was closer than you ever imagined? For centuries, humanity has asked the same question: does God truly exist? Born to Tell the Truth presents 5 irrefutable proofs that God is real. Drawing from science and common knowledge, this book bridges the gap between reason and belief. These are not just arguments, they are facts you cannot ignore. A journey that challenges the mind and strengthens the soul. The truth is waiting. Are you ready to see it?
Yeah, so it's called Born to Tell the Truth. Now available everywhere on Amazon, even in ebook format. Grab yourself a copy. And yeah, I'll see you another day also.